But I am joined by a man who equally wouldn't wear either, I'm sure. The smartest young man in this country, James Giles. James, thanks for joining us. I want to ask you first about this cockamamie conference which is taking place in Glasgow, the so-called COP meeting. There's so many things come up about it. Thousands of people have come in from overseas, untested, brimful, perhaps, of COVID, when Scotland's already the worst in Europe. Scotland is the worst in all of Europe for COVID-19. Secondly, the train drivers are going on strike. The bin men are also on strike because they're no longer prepared to work in the rat-infested conditions that they're being asked to work in for the money they're being asked to work for. And thirdly, now, the lawyers have gone on strike and will not handle any prisoners that are arrested in the expected protests at the conference. I mean, I knew the SNP were ludicrously incompetent, but this takes the shortbread, surely.
Well, it's a mixture, I think, of the devolved government and the wider UK government. You know, when they first got this presidency of the COP summit 2 years ago, it was great for Boris Johnson. He was there promoting a global post-Brexit Britain. But at best, I think the conference will be a damp squib, and at worst, it'll be just an abject humiliation for Glasgow and indeed the United Kingdom as a whole. As we discussed last week, many of the world's major players aren't going. And you're quite right. Glasgow, which was a beautiful, beautiful city, it's gorgeous, is going to be in complete disarray. Roads have already been closed. The Clyde Expressway has been shut. So locals are experiencing disruption. The bin men are on strike, as you say, the train drivers, the lawyers. You're bringing over 25,000 delegates, 16,000 police officers accompanying the 25,000 delegates.
Wow.
To Glasgow. It will be a super spreader event. They don't know the impact it will have. And it feels like something that's really happening to Glasgow and Britain rather than for Glasgow and Britain. And that's the greatest shame, I think.
I still don't understand why this could not have been done on Zoom.
Well, it's unfathomable as to why it wasn't done, at least in part, over a virtual setting. You are, of course, talking about reducing global emissions. You know, Boris Johnson last week was giving a speech in Luxembourg about politicians talking hot air over the climate, and it's now emerged today in the Daily Mirror that in the last week he has produced a year's worth of CO2 as if a car had been driving for a whole year by using the private jet of Lord Bamford, the magnate of JCB Diggers.
You're joking. He flew in a private jet to Luxembourg. Mm-hmm. What, like there's no scheduled flights?
Well, like there's no scheduled flights, nor a Eurostar. But not just that. After flying to Luxembourg and complaining about hot air, causing a load of CO2 emissions, he's then flown on the same private jet to Hartlepool for a campaign stop in light of the upcoming local elections, and then went from helicopter from Hartlepool to Wrexham, from Wrexham to the West Midlands, and back down to London. It would take a car driver a year to produce the amount of CO2 it's taken Boris Johnson in a week. So, you know, you want to talk about reducing global emissions. Well, Boris needs to look at his own record first. I mean, his wife, Carrie, I'm sure, would be pretty disgusted. She's a big environmentalist. You could describe it as a bit of a carry-on.
It's stunned. I mean, I don't know what to say to that news. I didn't know it. I'm grateful to you for bringing it to our attention. What about the COVID? Why are we so bad? Why is COVID so bad here? We're an island. In theory, we could have shut the island down, kept everyone away, and not had a single case.
Sure. I mean, as Boris Johnson said earlier this week, having the coronavirus jab, and, you know, vast majority of people in this country now are double jabbed, doesn't stop one from actually catching the disease and therefore registering as a case. It goes a long way to preventing serious illness or death, but one can still catch it and indeed pass it on, which is why the government's embarking on this booster programme, which so far has also failed dismally.
Yeah, that's not gone as well as the A and B rollout, has it?
Absolutely not. You know, the number of people...
Where's mine? I mean, At my age, I should already have had it.
Well, indeed, the number of people becoming eligible each week, less than 50% of them are actually receiving a booster. There was one gentleman highlighted in The Observer today who rang his GP 45 times to try and get a booster appointment, and then was told he was ringing the wrong number and he needed to ring somewhere else. He's still not got a jab, by the way. And so, there comes a point where one has to ask, when will the opposition begin to benefit from this? There was an opinion poll out yesterday that said that 41% of people didn't approve of Keir Starmer's leadership. Yet if you look at other opinion polls, the vast majority of the people don't know who he is. And so you get a strange situation where someone's saying, don't know who Keir Starmer is, but I do know he's doing a terrible job.
Well, and that's not illogical.
Is...
The fact that you don't know who he is, ipso facto, means he's not doing a good job.
Absolutely. But there comes a point where you have to wonder who benefits. The Greens, of course, have been on a bit of a rise in the polls here in Britain recently. They've overtaken the Liberal Democrats consistently now. YouGov recently put them as high as 10%. Whether that actually would translate to 10% of the vote in an election period, obviously, has been untested.
Doesn't usually, yeah.
But, people are looking for something different. And COP, if Boris Johnson doesn't play his cards right, could massively backfire on him, I think.
Well, I think there's a lot of people. I saw some good pieces in the press today. I see you've got all the papers there in which people are not buying this environmental stuff. They think it's just like the big pharma. It's now big greenery that's going to benefit from this. There's something... I can say this. I will never listen to anyone who tells me what's going to happen in 2060. Or as one thing today I saw, in 2080. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2080.
Oh, that's right.
Why pretend that you do and make policy decisions and expenditures now that will benefit people, you say, in 2080. That's a hard thing for a politician to sell,
Well, it certainly is. But the oddity for me is, Britain in particular is really on an ambitious green agenda, if I was being kind.
Yeah, but we only produce 1% of the world's emissions.
I was just coming to...
Why is it so important for us to be the world's leader on this?
Well, quite. We've already done a fair amount. There's more to do, sure, but banning gas boilers and requiring everyone to install heat pumps at 10 grand plus per pump per home isn't the answer.
Nice work if you can get it, as some people will.
For sure. There's going to be a government green grant available for people to get these pumps. The government's already issuing green bonds through National Savings and Investments. Terrible interest rate, but if you're green-minded, I guess, each to their own. But they've got this budget coming up where they're going to make savage cuts to, a wide range of services, whilst investing in...
When is the budget?
Like heat pumps. The budget's coming up very soon. Rishi Sunak will unveil it, I believe, on Wednesday in Parliament. It is Wednesday, yeah. It'll be an interesting budget. Michael Gove, in charge of the new Levelling Up department, has pushed for a lot of money to try and get things for the north. There's fears that HS2, the eastern wing of it, up to Leeds, will be scrapped. That's a project that already is costing tens of billions more than initially thought, but again is part of that green agenda. Obviously, the universal credit, £20 uplift has been removed now. So it'll be a tough budget for the Conservatives to sell. They're hiking taxes whilst reducing services again, whilst pursuing the heat pump agenda, as it were, which people, I think, will question in these tough times.
I'm definitely questioning it.
The worst winter for a generation, and people will actually, I think, be thinking they'd rather money spent on everyday services rather than heat pumps.